Korean billionaire's daughter kept crying in the cafe until the waitress said, "She just needs a mom." The atmosphere in Lumiere Cafe froze instantly. 50 of Seoul's elite went silent, chopsticks suspended midair, all eyes fixed on the center of the room. This wasn't just any cafe, it was the cafe, where reservations required months of waiting and coffee cost $65 a cup. But at precisely 7:32 p.m. on that rainy Tuesday, the soft jazz was shattered by a sound that chilled everyone present. The piercing wail of a child. In the center of the room, 5-year-old Minji Park was screaming so forcefully her face had turned crimson. Her designer hanbok, worth more than most people's monthly salary, crumpled and askew. Standing above her, looking utterly defeated, was Jae-sung Park, technological genius, founder of Paratech, worth $8.7 billion. The man whose wife's mysterious death 3 years earlier had been front-page news for weeks. But in this moment, all that power, all that money meant nothing. For the first time, the great Jae-sung Park looked helpless. The manager was already approaching, security appearing from side entrances. Whispers rippled through the room, harsh judgments about parenting and entitlement. Then something extraordinary happened. A waitress with exactly $12 in her bank account, not even enough for a single entree in this establishment, walked directly past security. She knelt beside the screaming child, completely ignored the billionaire, and whispered 5 words that changed everything. "She just needs a mom." Nobody knew it then, but those 5 words would uncover a secret buried for 5 years. A secret that would threaten the waitress's life. A secret that would shake the foundation of Korea's wealthiest family. If this moment already has you feeling something, hit that like button and keep watching. You won't believe what happens next. Doris Johnson adjusted her too tight uniform, the scratchy fabric irritating her skin after 12 straight hours on her feet. At 26, Doris felt ancient. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion or the way wealthy customers looked through her. It was the bone-deep weariness of living in a country where she was clearly an outsider, where her American upbringing made her stick out in every interaction. When her teaching contract at Seoul International Academy had fallen through 6 months ago, leaving her stranded in Korea with a mountain of student debt back in Chicago, Doris had taken the first job she could find. She'd been in Korea for just over a year total, and now worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, and still couldn't afford a ticket home. Table 12 needs more sparkling water. The imported kind, Manager Cho hissed, his small eyes narrowing with disdain. He'd never wanted to hire Doris. Her Korean was basic at best, and he believed her presence disturbed the refined atmosphere of the cafe. But the owner had insisted they needed an English-speaking server for international guests. And fix your hair. This isn't some American diner. Doris unconsciously touched her braids, neatly pulled back into a bun. She'd learned to let such comments roll off her back, saving her energy for survival. The cafe's atmosphere shifted when the heavy glass doors opened. First came 2 men in black suits with earpieces. Then Jae-sung Park himself in a custom suit worth more than Doris's annual earnings. His face was chiseled perfection. High cheekbones, strong jaw, calculating eyes that seemed to assess the value of everything they touched. But the little girl holding his hand caught Doris's attention. Minji Park, dressed in a modernized hanbok that made her look like a fairy tale princess, was dragging her feet, her small face flushed, her breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. Doris recognized the signs immediately. A sensory overload meltdown building like a pressure cooker about to explode. "Minji, please," Jae-sung whispered, strain evident in his voice. "Just sit down for a while. Just for a little while. Please." They were seated at the premier table beneath a crystal chandelier that cast rainbow prisms across white tablecloths. All eyes were on them, a spotlight they couldn't escape. Doris watched from near the kitchen, feeling a strange tightness in her chest. This wasn't a spoiled brat having a tantrum. This was a terrified little girl drowning in sensory input. The clink of silverware against fine china, the overlapping conversations, the oppressive formality pressing in from all sides like an invisible vice. "Stop staring and get back to work," Manager Cho snapped, shoving a tray into Doris's hands. "Stay far away from the Park table. You don't have the refinement for our VIPs." The insult stung, but Doris had grown accustomed to such barbs. They were just words, and words couldn't hurt any more than the constant physical pain of surviving on too little sleep and too little food. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Minji's server placed an elaborate dessert before her, a towering confection of gold leaf and rare fruits that looked more like architecture than food. "I don't want it," Minji said, her voice cracking like thin ice. "It's too pretty to eat." "Minji, please eat something," Jae-sung said, running his hand through his immaculate hair, the first crack appearing in his perfect facade. "Do you want your tablet? Should we go home?" "I want Iyama," the girl whispered. The word landed like a grenade. Everyone knew that Minji's mother, Sunhai Park, had died 3 years ago in a car accident while driving along the coastal roads outside Seoul. Minji had been in the car but miraculously survived without a scratch, a detail that had fueled conspiracy theories for months. "Iyama isn't here, Minji," Jae-sung said, his voice dropping to a pained whisper. "Please stop. People are watching." "No, I want Omame." Minji swept her arm across the table with unexpected force. The artful dessert, crystal water glass, and vase of rare orchids went flying, creating a catastrophic tableau on the pristine floor. Minji slid from her chair and curled into a protective ball amidst the debris, covering her ears and rocking back and forth, her screams escalating to an unbearable pitch that made everyone wince. "Disgraceful," a woman at the next table muttered, dabbing her mouth with a silk napkin. "Money clearly can't buy manners. Control your child." Jae-sung stood, his face ashen. Security guards approached, their shadows looming over the sobbing child like dark mountains. Doris didn't remember making a conscious decision. She didn't calculate the risk to her livelihood, didn't consider the rent due in 3 days or the calls from debt collectors. She set her tray down with a decisive clink and walked straight into the center of the maelstrom. "Stop," she said, her voice carrying a firmness that sliced through the chaos. Jae-sung looked up, momentarily stunned. "Excuse me?" "Back off," Doris said to the security guards, kneeling on the floor in the mess of dessert and broken glass, ruining her only uniform. Manager Cho gasped in horror, but Doris didn't care. She didn't reach for Minji or try to quiet her. She simply sat a few feet away and lowered her head until she was at eye level with the child. "It's too loud, isn't it?" Doris whispered in English, then repeated the few Korean words she knew for loud and scary. The code switching caught Minji's attention. The child stopped screaming, gasping for air between sobs. Her wide, tear-filled eyes locked onto Doris's face. "The lights," Doris continued softly, ignoring 50 pairs of judgmental eyes boring into her back. "They buzz like angry bees, and the forks sound like metal birds fighting. It hurts your ears and makes your skin feel too tight." Minji hiccuped, her tiny chest heaving. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Doris extended her hand, palm up, but didn't move closer. "My name is Doris. I know a magic trick to make the bad sounds go away. Would you like to see?" Manager Cho was frantically signaling for Doris to stop, slashing his hand across his throat, but she pretended not to see. Minji nodded again, curiosity momentarily overriding her distress. Doris began to hum, a deep, soothing melody her grandmother used to sing, a spiritual that had calmed generations of children. She tapped her finger on the floor in a steady rhythm. 1 2 1 2. "Copy me." Minji hesitated, then tapped one small finger on the floor. 1 2. "She just needs a mom," Doris said, looking up at Jae-sung. "Not a bodyguard, not an audience, not a perfect princess dress. She needs someone to show her she's safe when the world gets too loud." Minji crawled toward her, bypassing her father completely. She crawled straight into the arms of a waitress in a stained uniform, burying her face against Doris's shoulder, her sobs softening into the quieter tears of relief. "What do you think you're doing?" Manager Cho hissed, grabbing Doris's arm and yanking her upward with brutal force. Minji cried out as the comfort was ripped away. "Get your hands off her," Jae-sung commanded, his voice dropping to a register that sent chills through the room. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. Power radiated from him like heat from fire. Manager Cho froze, his hand still clamped around Doris's upper arm. Jae-sung really looked at Doris. Taking in the worn edges of her uniform, the exhaustion etched into her face, and the way his daughter was reaching for her hand. "I'm sorry about the mess," Doris said, pulling her arm free. "I'll clean it up." "Leave it," Jae-sung said. He extracted a black card from his jacket and tossed it onto the table with calculated casualness. "Add $5,000 for the damage and another $5,000 for her tip." The room collectively gasped. $10,000 in a single transaction, more money than most of them would casually spend in a month. "We're leaving," Jae-sung announced, gathering a now-quiet Min-ji into his arms. The child looked over her father's shoulder, extending one hand toward Doris. "Bye, Miss Doris," Min-ji whispered in careful English, a language she clearly understood but rarely spoke. Jae-sung paused at the door, fixing Doris with an inscrutable gaze. "Thank you." Then they were gone, the cafe doors swinging closed behind them with a soft hydraulic sigh. Manager Cho approached Doris, trembling with fury. The $5,000 tip meant nothing to him compared to the loss of face, the breach of protocol. "Pack your things," he whispered venomously. "The tip will cover the establishment's damages and the emotional distress caused to our other patrons. You humiliated this cafe. You're fired. If this moment already has you feeling something, hit that like button and keep watching. You won't believe what happens next." The rain in Seoul was relentless that night, transforming the glamorous city into a glistening, treacherous labyrinth. Being broke made the rain colder somehow, as if poverty itself lowered your body temperature. Doris trudged through the downpour, carrying a small paper bag containing her street shoes and half-eaten kimbap. She had no umbrella. It had broken last month, and replacing it meant choosing between a dry head and a meal. The bus to her neighborhood took 45 minutes, each stop removing her further from the glittering center where the elites played. Her building was a gray monument to urban decay, water stains mapping its concrete facade like tears. Doris climbed 6 flights of stairs. The elevator had been temporarily out of service for 3 years, her legs burning with fatigue. She fumbled with her key, hands numb from cold, and pushed open the door to her tiny studio apartment. Taped inside the door was a notice, its red letters screaming their message. Final eviction notice. Outstanding balance, $1,500. You have 72 hours to vacate. Doris slid down the door until she hit the floor, her wet clothes puddling around her. She didn't cry. She had forgotten how to cry years ago when she'd received news of her parents' accident. Tears required energy she didn't have. She looked at the framed photograph on her nightstand, her graduation from Northwestern University, standing between her proud parents. The education that was supposed to be her ticket to a better life had become an anchor of debt, dragging her deeper into poverty. "I'm sorry," she whispered to them. "I'm still trying." The next morning was a blur of rejection. 7 cafes, 4 restaurants, 3 convenience stores, no one was hiring her. Her Korean wasn't good enough for customer service. Her teaching certification didn't transfer without expensive bureaucratic processes. Her obvious foreignness made employers uncomfortable. By 4 p.m., she was sitting on a bench in Uido Park, counting her last dollars. She had enough for either one meal or the first installment on her overdue cell phone bill. Not both. The choice was no choice at all. Without her phone, she couldn't find work. A matte black Genesis G90 pulled to the curb. A man stepped out. Not Jae-sung Park, but an older man with military bearing and a face that had weathered difficulties. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and an expression of efficient determination. "Johnson Doris." "Who's asking?" Doris replied, instantly wary. "Mr. Park would like a word." "I didn't steal anything," Doris said quickly, her heart hammering. "If this is about the uniform, I left it in my locker." The man held up a phone showing a live feed of Jae-sung pacing in a vast, modernist living room while Min-ji screamed under a glass coffee table. "She hasn't stopped since this morning," the man explained, genuine concern cracking his professional veneer. "She's asking for the magic lady. Mr. Park is desperate." Doris looked at the screen, at the little girl's contorted face. She recognized that pain. The same pain she felt every day when she woke up alone, thousands of miles from home, caught between worlds. "I'm not a babysitter." Mr. Park is prepared to pay you $10,000 to come to the house for 1 hour. $10,000. That was rent for 6 months. That was a significant chunk of her student loans. That was breathing room, a chance to regroup. Okay, she said simply. The drive took 30 minutes, winding through Seoul's exclusive neighborhoods and up into the hills where houses had names rather than numbers. Park Manor was a masterpiece of contemporary Korean architecture, a perfect marriage of traditional elements and cutting-edge design. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured panoramic views of Seoul below, while a traditional courtyard garden provided an oasis of tranquility. As they approached the entrance, Doris noted several security staff patrolling the grounds and glimpsed household employees through various windows. This was clearly a fully staffed estate, befitting one of Korea's wealthiest men. Jae-sung himself opened the door, though a line of staff stood respectfully behind him. He was transformed from the polished businessman of the previous night. Today he wore casual clothes, expensive still but rumpled. His hair was disheveled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You came," he said, exhaling with relief. A piercing wail echoed through the house, making them both wince. "She's in the family room," Jae-sung said. "I can't get her out from under the table." Doris followed the sound, walking past artwork worth millions and technology so cutting-edge it probably wasn't available to the public yet. The contrast between this palace and her cramped apartment hit her like a physical blow. The family room was a war zone. Toys were strewn everywhere. A flat-screen TV lay shattered. Min-ji was indeed under a massive glass coffee table, wrapped in what appeared to be a cashmere blanket, sobbing as if her heart would break. Doris didn't announce herself. She simply sat down on the floor, cross-legged, several feet from the table. She pulled a small folded paper crane from her pocket. She'd made it from a bus receipt while waiting in the park. She set it on the floor and flicked it with her finger so it slid under the table. Silence fell abruptly. Then a small hand darted out and grabbed the paper crane. "It knows how to fly," Doris said softly. "But only when it's quiet. Loud noises scare its wings." Min-ji's tear-streaked face appeared at the edge of the table. "Magic Lady," she hiccuped. "It's Doris," she smiled. "But Magic Lady works too." Min-ji crawled out from her hiding place, the expensive blanket dragging behind her. Without hesitation, she climbed into Doris's lap and laid her head against her chest. The child's body, which had been rigid with tension, gradually relaxed. Jae-sung watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. "How do you do that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Doris stroked Min-ji's hair. "I listen. Adults listen to the words. Kids need you to listen to the feelings." Jae-sung entered the room fully, moving with the careful deliberation of someone approaching a wild animal. He sat on the edge of a chair, studying Doris with unnerving intensity. "You were fired, weren't you?" he asked abruptly. "Because of last night." Doris didn't look up. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." His tone left no room for argument. "I looked into you, Johnson Doris, Masters in Education from Northwestern. Teaching position at Seoul International Academy fell through 6 months ago when the school lost funding. 3 different service jobs since then, struggling to make ends meet. Eviction notice filed yesterday. Outstanding student loans in the U.S. Doris stiffened, anger flaring hot and fast. She gently moved Min-ji from her lap and stood up, suddenly acutely aware of her worn jeans and faded sweater in this palace of luxury. "If you're done with your invasion of my privacy, I'd like my money so I can leave." "I don't want you to leave," Jae-sung said quietly. "I'm not a charity case," Doris snapped, her composure cracking. "I don't need your pity." "This isn't pity," Jae-sung replied, standing as well. The businessman was back, his spine straightening, his gaze sharpening. "This is necessity. I have a global corporation to run. I have responsibilities I've been neglecting because I can't leave my daughter alone with anyone without disaster. You are the first person she's responded to since her mother died. And frankly, I don't care why. I care that it works." He took a step closer, and the air between them seemed to crackle with some indefinable energy. "I'm offering you a job. Live-in caregiver for Min-ji. Salary is $100,000 annually, plus full benefits, including assistance with your student loan payments. You would have the guest house on the property. Doris felt lightheaded. The amount was astronomical, more money than she would earn in 3 years of teaching. Mr. Park, Jae-sung, this is crazy. You don't know me. I know enough. He paused, his expression darkening slightly. There is one condition. Doris narrowed her eyes, suddenly wary. There was always a catch, always a price too high to pay. What condition? Jae-sung's face hardened, a shadow passing over his features. You handle Minji. You make her happy, but you stay away from the ancestral shrine room on the east side of the house. The traditional Hanok building is off-limits. If you go in there even once, you're gone. No second chances. Doris stared at him, sensing a deeper current beneath his words. There was a secret here, something dark and painful hiding behind his carefully controlled expression. She should run. She should take the money for this one. Visit and disappear. But then she felt a small hand tugging at her jeans. She looked down to see Minji holding up the paper crane. Fly again? The child asked, her eyes still red-rimmed but hopeful. Doris looked at Jae-sung, at his desperate eyes and rigid posture. She thought of her eviction notice. She thought of her parents' sacrifices to get her through college. Deal, she said. The story is just heating up. If you're loving this emotional roller coaster, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss part 2. For 3 weeks, Doris lived a life she had only seen in movies. The guest house was larger than any home she'd ever lived in. A modern interpretation of traditional Korean architecture, with floor heating, a private garden, and amenities that made her previous struggle seem like a distant nightmare. The real miracle was Minji. The screaming stopped. The tantrums faded. Under Doris's care, the terrified child began to blossom. They spent hours in the estate's magnificent gardens, hunting for insects or floating leaf boats in the koi pond. Doris taught Minji English nursery rhymes and helped her practice Korean with American words mixed in. A playful language bridge they built together. She showed her how to make Chicago-style deep dish pizza, much to the horror of the family's private chef. Jae-sung remained a distant figure, buried in work, often leaving before dawn and returning after Minji was asleep. But Doris would sometimes catch him watching them from the terrace of his home office, a complex expression on his face. Part relief, part sadness, part something else she couldn't identify. The fragile peace at Park Manor shattered during Chuseok, the Korean Harvest Festival. Jae-sung's mother, the formidable Park Hee-ja, arrived from her home in Busan for the traditional family celebration. From the moment the elegant 70-year-old woman stepped through the door, her disapproval radiated like cold fire. So this is the American girl playing at being Korean, Mrs. Park said in formal, old-fashioned Korean. I suppose she's qualified to teach Minji proper manners? Doris bowed deeply, mustering every ounce of proper Korean etiquette she'd learned. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Park. Minji speaks of you often. Mrs. Park's eyes narrowed. Does she? Strange, since she barely speaks at all when I visit. Perhaps you've been teaching her your American ways. The days that followed were an exercise in endurance. Mrs. Park criticized everything. Doris's Korean, her mannerisms, the way she dressed Minji, the games they played. Nothing was Korean enough, traditional enough, proper enough for the Park family legacy. On the third evening, Jae-sung hosted an important business dinner. Technology leaders from across Asia gathered in the formal dining room, with Mrs. Park presiding as hostess. Minji was dressed in an elaborate hanbok that restricted her movement. Her hair pulled back so tightly she whimpered when Doris tried to comfort her. She will join us for the first course, Mrs. Park decreed. The child must learn her place in society. She's 5, Doris objected, forgetting her place in her concern for Minji. She's overwhelmed. This is exactly what triggered her meltdown at the cafe. You forget yourself, Mrs. Park hissed. You are the help, not family. Minji is a Park. She must learn to bear the weight of that name. The dinner began disastrously. Minji was silent and rigid, her small face pale with tension. When she dropped her spoon, Mrs. Park's disapproval was palpable. The child's hands began to tremble. May I take Minji to get some water? Doris asked, seeing the warning signs. She's fine, Mrs. Park said dismissively. Return to your quarters. We don't need you here. Minji knocked over her water glass and began to cry. Mrs. Park grasped her arm with unnecessary force. Enough. Parks do not behave this way. Minji pulled away violently. As she did, her small hand caught Mrs. Park's jade pendant, an ancient family heirloom. The chain snapped, sending the priceless jade crashing to the floor. This has been in our family for 15 generations. Mrs. Park's face contorted with rage. Minji fled the room, sobbing. As Doris started after her, Mrs. Park's voice cut through the air. Empty your pockets. Confused, Doris turned out her pockets, which contained only a tissue and hair tie. The pendant is gone. She has stolen our family treasure. I didn't take anything, Doris said, her voice steady despite her rage. Of course you would, Mrs. Park sneered. You Americans always take what isn't yours. Jae-sung moved to his mother's side and spoke softly in her ear. Mrs. Park's expression shifted from triumph to shock. Enough, mother, Jae-sung said firmly. He turned to his guests. I apologize for the disturbance. He guided Doris from the room, his hand lingering on the small of her back. I'm sorry, he said. She set you up. Why does she hate me so much? Because you remind her of someone she wants to forget. Later that night, Jae-sung came to the guest house. My mother is leaving tomorrow. I've made it clear her behavior was unacceptable. Why would she test me like that? Because she's afraid of how much Minji loves you, Jae-sung said simply. And perhaps how much he stopped abruptly. Doris felt her heart skip, then forced herself back to reality. I'm just doing my job. No, Jae-sung said softly. You're doing much more than that. You're healing my daughter. You're bringing life back to this house. He stepped closer. And you're making me remember what it feels like to want something for myself. Not just for the company or the family name. This story is just heating up. If you're loving this emotional roller coaster, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss part 2. 2 months later, a typhoon hit the coast with unexpected ferocity. Jae-sung was trapped at his headquarters, unable to return due to flooding. Keep Minji away from windows, he warned Doris over the phone. And stay away from the ancestral shrine. It isn't structurally sound in high winds. By 9 that evening, the storm had intensified. Minji was asleep when Doris heard a door slamming somewhere distant. She checked Minji's room. The bed was empty. Panic seized her throat. A giggle echoed from the east wing, the forbidden zone. Doris ran, reaching the heavy wooden doors that separated the modern house from the traditional structure. They stood ajar. Minji, come out. It's not safe. Another giggle from deep within the forbidden wing. Doris hesitated, remembering Jae-sung's warning. But Minji was in there, in a structurally unsound building during a typhoon. She pushed through the doors. The ancestral shrine wasn't what she expected. Rather than a decrepit space, it was immaculately maintained, smelling of sandalwood incense and old paper. At the heart of the structure was a courtyard garden. Beyond it stood a final room, golden light spilling from its partially open doors. Doris crossed the rain-soaked courtyard at a run and pushed the door open. Minji, you have to. The words died in her throat. This wasn't an ancestral shrine. It was a memorial room. Sitting in the center, looking up at a large portrait, was Minji. Mommy's room, Minji said softly. The room was dedicated entirely to Sunhai Park. Photographs covered every surface. Sunhai graduating, Sunhai painting, Sunhai holding a newborn Minji. Dominating the space was a large portrait of Sunhai in a white hanbok, smiling enigmatically. Doris stepped closer, studying the portrait. She could see why Minji was so drawn to it. The woman had a gentleness in her eyes that seemed to transcend the canvas. What is this place? Doris whispered. Minji tugged at her hand. Look, Miss Doris. Mommy's special book. Minji was holding a leather-bound journal with the initials SHP embossed in gold. With careful hands, Doris opened it to a random page. Something is wrong at the company. The offshore accounts don't match the public filings. I've been tracking the discrepancies for months. Someone is stealing millions. Jae-sung is too trusting. He believes in the goodness of his family. I need to show him the evidence before it's too late. Asterisk. Doris flipped through the pages, her heart racing. Each entry revealed more of a growing conspiracy. Sunhai had discovered financial fraud within Park Industries and was gathering evidence. The final entry, dated the day of the accident. I found the proof. The transfers lead back to an account in Switzerland. I'm taking Minji to my sister Haijian's house in Busan where she'll be safe, then presenting my findings to the board tomorrow. Haijin has always been suspicious of the family finances. I pray Jae-sung will forgive me for not telling him sooner, but I needed to be certain. Asterisk. The journal fell from Doris's hands. Sunhai hadn't died in a random accident. She had been gathering evidence of corruption within Park Industries and was planning to flee to her sister Haijin, who apparently shared her suspicions. Mommy was sad, Minji said, her small voice cutting through Doris's shock. She cried a lot before she went away. Suddenly, the lights flared to full brightness. Standing in the doorway, drenched from the storm, was Jae-sung. I told you, he said, his voice deathly quiet, never to come in here. What is this place? Doris asked, gesturing to the shrine. Why is it forbidden? I tried to keep you away, Jae-sung replied, walking into the room. This is private. This is my grief. Sunhai found something, didn't she? Something about the company's finances. Jae-sung's expression darkened. You read her journal. The accident. It wasn't an accident, was it? And what about her sister Haijin in Busan? Does she know what happened? Haijin is under surveillance. She's been trying to prove foul play for years, but without evidence, she's been dismissed as a grieving sister with conspiracy theories, Jae-sung said flatly. Sunhai wasn't just driving to her sister's. She was running from something she'd discovered. What did she find? Embezzlement on a massive scale. Offshore accounts, tax evasion, money laundering for some of Korea's most powerful families. His voice broke. She was taking the coastal road to Busan. The car went through the guardrail into the ocean. Minji was thrown clear. Sunhai wasn't. It was an accident, then? No. The investigators I hired found evidence of tampering. The brake lines had been cut. Doris gasped. Murder? But who? I don't know. The evidence disappeared before it could be documented. Someone powerful wanted Sunhai silenced. And you think the killer is still out there? I know they are, Jae-sung said grimly. That's why I needed someone outside our usual circles in the household. Someone who might notice things others wouldn't. The realization hit Doris. You weren't just hiring a nanny. You were hoping I'd help uncover the truth. I didn't expect you to care about Minji the way you do, Jae-sung admitted. I didn't expect to care about you. Before either could speak again, the lights died. The generator had failed. That's not right, Jae-sung said, instantly alert. The generator has triple redundancy. Suddenly, Minji's scream cut through the storm. From somewhere outside, they raced to her room to find the window open, rain pouring across the empty bed. Doris looked out to see a figure in black carrying a struggling child across the rain-soaked lawn toward the cliffs. They're taking her to the Overlook Pavilion, Jae-sung said, already running. He pulled out his phone. Security. Intruder on the southeast grounds. Doris vaulted through the window onto the lawn, her heart pounding. The traditional pavilion stood at the edge of the property, overlooking the sea hundreds of feet below. She burst through the pavilion doors to find the kidnapper holding Minji dangerously close to the edge where the railing had partially collapsed. The figure pulled back their hood, revealing Secretary Jean, Jae-sung's longtime personal assistant. Let her go, Doris shouted. You shouldn't have found the journal, Jean said, his smile manic. You should have stayed in the kitchen where you belonged. I'm not a threat to you. Just let Minji go. You've been asking questions, poking around, just like she did. You sent the anonymous messages, Doris realized, connecting the dots from what Jae-sung had told her. You made Sunhai paranoid. You cut her brake lines. I had no choice, Jean confessed. She found the offshore transfers. She was going to tell everyone. And now you're going to kill a child? Doris asked, edging closer. Minji is innocent. Stay back. Jean yelled, his grip tightening. One more step and I drop her. Magic lady, help, Minji cried. Jean, listen to me, Doris said, using her calm voice. You don't want to hurt a child. You're scared. You're trapped. But this isn't the way out. Jin's grip on Minji wavered slightly. Jae-sung appeared in the doorway, a security guard's gun in his hand. Put my daughter down, he commanded. Then a new shadow appeared, Mrs. Park, wielding a wooden staff. She swung it with surprising strength, striking her son from behind. Jae-sung crumpled to the ground, the gun sliding across the wet floor. Well done, Jean, Mrs. Park said, stepping over her unconscious son. But plans have changed. No ransom. No witnesses. Mrs. Park, Doris gasped. Business is business, dear. I built Park Industries with my husband. Jae-sung was ruining our legacy with his charitable foundations. Sun-hye discovered my offshore accounts. She picked up the fallen gun. Tonight, tragedy strikes. And I, the grieving mother, inherit everything. Throw the child over, Jean, Mrs. Park commanded. No. Jean hesitated, horror on his face. This is about money, not murder. Do it or I shoot you first. Doris locked eyes with Jean. Jean, you helped me once. You showed me where Minji's toys were hidden. You're not a child killer. Mrs. Park fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Jean closed his eyes and threw Minji. Not toward the sea, but toward Doris. Doris caught the child, covering Minji's body with her own. Mrs. Park aimed the gun at them, but it jammed in the wet conditions. Those precious seconds were all Doris needed. She grabbed a ceremonial brass bell and hurled it at Mrs. Park's head. The older woman staggered backward, tripping over a fallen beam, and fell through the broken railing into the storm beyond. Doris held Minji tight, murmuring comfort in her ear. It's okay. You're safe now. Jae-sung groaned, pushing himself up. He looked at Doris, at his daughter in her arms, and at the broken railing. Doris, he rasped. We're here, she whispered. We're safe. This story is just heating up. If you're loving this emotional roller coaster, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss part 2. 1 year later, the Seoul Cultural Bridge Center opened its doors. Built on the site of the cafe where Doris and Minji first met, it was dedicated to supporting international children adapting to life in Korea. In the center's garden, Doris sat wearing a simple sundress. She wore a unique ring, platinum and sapphire, representing her new beginning in Korea. Minji played nearby, her laughter floating on the spring air. She no longer had meltdowns, no longer feared crowds. Jae-sung approached, carrying traditional Korean sweets alongside American cookies. He sat beside Doris, kissing her cheek. She looks happy, he observed. She is happy, Doris replied. She just needed someone to understand her world. I'm understanding more every day, Jae-sung said, taking her hand. Thanks to both of you. Doris leaned against him, drawing strength and giving it in equal measure. She looked at the small memorial garden nearby, where a stone marker honored Sun-hye. Not forgotten, but peacefully remembered. We uncovered the truth for her, Doris whispered to the wind. And I found myself in the process. They had worked together to bring Sun-hye's evidence to light. The investigation had revealed the extent of Mrs. Park's financial crimes. Even Hyejin, Sun-hye's sister, had finally found closure and now visited regularly, becoming the aunt Minji needed. Minji ran back to them, breathless and smiling. Doris Yama, look, I made a new friend. Appa says we're lucky, Minji said, looking at her father and then at Doris. No, Doris corrected gently. We're not lucky. We're loved. As cherry blossoms scattered around them like snow, Doris knew it was the truest thing anyone had ever said. The waitress with $12 to her name was now wealthy beyond measure. Not because of Park Industries' billions, but because she had found the one thing money couldn't buy, a family that transcended borders and the wounds of the past. From a crying child in a cafe to a terrifying confrontation in a typhoon, Doris had learned that sometimes the people who feel most out of place are the ones who build the strongest bridges. And Jae-sung learned that true legacy isn't built in corporate boardrooms, but in the hearts of the people we choose to love. This story touched my heart, and I hope it touched yours too. If you believe love transcends all boundaries, smash that like button right now and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment letting me know what part made you tear up the most, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every week. Until next time, remember that family isn't always what you're born into. Sometimes it's what you find.